I will go on the record to say, I think the AI capabilities that are being included in, for, with, and around Google Workspace are game changers. You will be able to do things, and hopefully we're going to show things that inspire you that we've never been able to do before. I think it brings a whole new lifeblood beyond the hype of what you can do with solutions. It allows you to bring it in. So when I say for example, for Google Workspace, if you think about the Google for Workspace out of the box, extended SKU solution. How many folks here actually have Google for Workspace running in their environment?
Gemini for Workspace?
Sorry, what did I say? Gemini for Workspace. Cool. Not everybody. Well, not everybody yet. And that's understandable, by the way. That also reads opportunity for developers, but we'll get back to that in a second. So we're going to cover a use case on how you actually can extend the product and start to build solutions using it for Workspace. Then we're going to talk about with Workspace, how you actually can use Gemini to help you build apps with things like Apps Script. And then the final one, what we're going to focus a lot on, is in Workspace. How do you bring solutions in Workspace? How do you include Gemini, Vertex inside your applications? And how do we do it approachably?
We can use Gemini standalone to be our coding assistant in Apps Script. And this is something that I do all the time. It saves me countless hours coding. And one of the benefits is when you use Gemini to help you code Apps Script, you can get a head start on your project. So it can give you some starter code. If you're running into an error message, it can help you understand what that error message means and how to resolve it. And if you are working on something that you found a code sample for and you want to use it, but it's not exactly what you need, you can plug it into Gemini to help you understand what it's doing and then change it to the business case that you specifically need. Another great benefit of using Gemini with Workspace to build an Apps Script app is that a lot of times when you're using Apps Script, it's really a smaller solution of a much larger project or program that you're working on, and so it allows you to focus on the bigger picture. And I want to share an example of that happened to me personally a few months ago. I was actually running a design sprint for a cross-functional team across marketing, DevRel, content, and product. And I wanted to run a brainstorm on a problem that we were trying to solve for, and I wanted to use a method that required some random categories that we would brainstorm off of, and I wanted to build a simple app that would flip over cards to reveal a category to brainstorm on because I didn't want them to see them all at once. We had several teams that were brainstorming different topics, and I thought this app would be helpful to get that going. But this was a small part of a much larger set of tasks I had to run this sprint. Now, this type of app that I wanted to build is not necessarily complicated, but much like David, I don't want to sit there and write HTML and CSS. So instead, I had Gemini do it for me at first, and I was able to build it under 20 minutes. So what I want to show you is how I did that. So here we're looking at Gemini standalone. I'm going to pull up the first prompt that I asked for. All right, everyone can see this okay? Okay, so here we go. Let me see if I can extend this. Now, you'll see I put in my prompt some very basic building blocks. I gave it a persona. I said, hey, congratulations, you're an Apps Script developer. I also described the functionality that I wanted. I had 6 categories, so I wanted 6 numbered cards. And I wanted to be able to click them, to reveal the category, and then click them back. And now, in this example, I've actually updated it to create a icebreaker app, because I figure for you all in the audience, you might not be running design sprints like I was, but everyone's been to a meeting where maybe you have to get an icebreaker going and you want to keep it interesting, so you could ask different questions and have people pick a card to reveal that. So that's what we're going to build here today. So in this prompt, I've given it a good amount of information, a good amount of context and instruction, and I've described the functionality and the look and feel. And so what Gemini came back with was separate code that I needed from my code.js file. And if anyone's unfamiliar with Apps Script, that is the default name of your first script file when you create a new project in Apps Script. So I was able to copy this into the project, and then it gave me my index.html file, which again, if you create a new HTML file in the Apps Script editor, that is the default name as well. So it was very familiar to me. It knows what it's talking about, which was reassuring. So I was able to copy this in, and I'm going to show you just from this first prompt what it was able to come up with. OK, so here's what it gave me just right off the bat, I've got my 6 cards. When I click it, okay, great. I've got some text here. I'm probably going to want to play with the CSS on this, but this is a great start. So I can click in, I can click out. This is working almost exactly as I pictured it. So now, with just a couple more prompts, I asked it to add a header and a description to the top. And then, Gemini's not perfect, so what had happened was it was putting the header next to the cards. So I just said again, hey, this is showing up next to the cards. Can we make sure it's above? And then the last and third prompt that I added was just me being picky, and I wanted to add some space between the top of the page and the heading. So now I'm going to show you the final app that I was able to create for an icebreaker. And here we are. This just took a couple of minor tweaks after Gemini did all the heavy lifting. So we have our numbered cards. We've got our icebreaker categories like jobs, what's your first job, advice, what's the best career advice you've ever gotten, and something about favorites. And Charles, do you want to take this question?
I don't remember that one being in there.
You can think about it later. We can chat offline. So this is a great use case if you have something that you want to build and you want to hit the ground running, because you've got a lot of other things to think about. So let Gemini make your life easier by using it with Workspace with Apps Script. All right, now, Charles, I think before we go into building Gemini into Workspace, why don't we touch on ways that we can use Gemini for Workspace, the built-in model?
Okay. Like anything you do with Workspace, your first goal is to use built-in functionality. With AI, it's no exception, right? If Gemini can do something, why not have Gemini do it? But as you know, the main reason we are Workspace developers is because we want to extend the product and make the product work the way we want to. And so I took an example which is near and dear to a lot of us. We go to a lot of conferences, or I expect we do. And the first thing you have to do is you have to figure out, well, what are the sessions I want to go to? My dream has always been, don't give me a bunch of sessions and make me pile through it and figure it all out. Why can't AI just tell me the sessions I want to go to? I think we're there, right? And so we took a spreadsheet that's literally just sitting inside of a spreadsheet. And I'll put these on for a second so I can see what I'm talking about. And if you go up into the Gemini on the top here, you can do great things like, first of all, I love this. Without even saying anything, you can see in the panel, Gemini is going to go up and automatically take a summary of that content. So in this case, I'm going to expand that up. And what it says, this seems to be a table for a conference. So I love the fact that Gemini's got it. It's focused on Google Apps Script and blah, 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 some other stuff about it. So it's nailed it. Now, one of the great things, David mentioned this earlier, you can build and train your own models. In all these demos we're about to show you, we've done nothing but use the standard stock Gemini and Vertex models. Okay, so there's no training required. It just knew what that was by logically looking at the categories of this spreadsheet. So I love that in documentation context. So say I wanted to actually bring this down a level and say, you know what, I don't want to read through all this, and I want to pick out just the sessions that make sense to me. Maybe I want to come in and say, show me sessions about Gmail development. And let's see what it comes back up with. So I'm going to bring that and hit OK. And go off it again. Obviously, when you're working with tools like Gemini, the better the prompt, the more refined the prompt, the better the output. So if the whole garbage in, garbage out, if you don't say a lot. But the great thing is you can do multiple tries on this. And each time it comes up differently depending upon what you put in. So in this one here, it says there are 2 sessions that will teach you about Gemini development. Awesome. On day 2, using the Gmail API. On day 1, using the Google Contacts API, which Gemini thought was related, which is close, right? They're obviously a good idea. So that's a great start. Now, it's awesome that Gemini is able to do that. Again, I've done no work. I've read nothing. I don't have to worry about it. It's just automatically done for me. So it's picked my sessions for me. Awesome. Now I'd like to put it on my calendar. OK, so let's do that. Can you put these on my? And first of all, what I love about working with Gemini is the way you can have these multi-turn conversations where you can ask prompts about the prompts and continue to build on it. So this should be automatic. So I'm going to say do that. And it'll go out there, and it will take my items, and it will do nothing with it. Because
Womp womp.
as wonderful as Gemini is, it's still evolving. In fact, Karen and I started doing sessions around this when we first saw the potential, and we've already seen the functionality grow exponentially. There's so many things. We built a bunch of demos that are now obsolete, which is pretty cool, because Gemini's actually doing that. And as a developer, you know that risk exists. And so that's OK, because again, you can customize your solutions and make it the right way. So I encourage people to still build them. But there's still things that Gemini simply doesn't do yet, and this is clearly one of them. This application would be killer if it not only told me the right sessions, but then put them on my calendar for me and made it much more useful. So we built a custom add-on to do this. All right, so how does that work instead? As you know, if you are using add-ons, we put a little add-on here called the Agenda Builder. Notice we've got a panel that popped up here. And the full panel you can see. I take a prompt. But then, unlike Gemini with its native terms, I can actually help and assist the user. And this is where I think some of the secret sauce is for a developer. Because users are good at getting prompts, right? But imagine you have a large organization or customer base you're supporting. Not everybody's going to nail the prompt right. So as a developer, the more guidance you can give, in this case, we have a drop-down saying, I'd like certain types of skill level, and you can pick one. That just makes it richer and easier to get things back. So I'm going to come up here, first of all, in the preferences, say, show me sessions about Gmail. And I also did autocompletes in this app as the developer, so folks can come through and even pick ones. And I'm just going to say I want sessions about Gmail. And I also put a faceted search in here, which is kind of neat. I allow them by categories to automatically go pick solutions there. So before I do this, though, I'm going to show my calendar and agenda just to show you. Nothing up our sleeve. You can see a couple days here where there are empty. Let's see if we can make this actually work for a demo. Let's propose the agenda and see what Gemini comes back with. So what's happening here on the back end while it's working? For the prompt, I take the ideas out of the prompts, and I break down and create a long text prompt. Meanwhile, I'm sending an instruction prompt of that entire range of data to Vertex, sending the two in, and then getting the response. And notice, if you remember what I put in my little default, give me sessions only about Gmail, and it nailed them pretty perfectly. It got one. Now, one of the fun things I did here, just to make this interesting, a lot of folks care about color coding. Anyone want to pick a color?
Flamingo.
Flamingo. By the way, these are the actual color names that we actually use for calendars in our API. So if you, could have said pink, but no. We added to the agenda. And of course, now, what we couldn't get Gemini to do natively out of the box. If I go to the calendar, please be there, and it is.
Please be
and
there.
It's in Flamingo. Now the great thing is, the use case here, which makes a lot of sense. Let me come back over to the agenda builder. Where did I lose the agenda builder at? Hold on. Up. I lost the sheet. Here it is. Let me come back up full screen again. And the nice user experience here, because the card framework allows me to stack cards up here. Automatically, I can just backtrack as the user and say, you know what? I'd like to add some more, so I can expand this out. So maybe I can say, you know what? Because she told me with her flip card, I only want sessions where Kara is the speaker. So I get brownie points. But the neat thing here, and again, maybe I only want an Apps Script session, because I know that's what she's going to want to talk about, and I can pull it off. Oh, I pulled Apps Script out. Oh, I did that the wrong way. This will be an interesting answer. Oh, it still found it because Kara did do the session. And notice, again, we didn't train the model. We didn't say anything about it. It found her one session. And I'm going to add her in banana. And when you go to the calendar, please be there. And there it is.
Great.
So the neat thing is you can see how this actually will allow a very great user experience. And it actually attached things that Gemini doesn't quite do yet.
Amazing. Wow. Now, it's no surprise that Charles built this beautiful add-on because it's incredible. It's got a great UI, it's got a great experience. But if you are just starting out, what I'd like to do now is show you one of the most practical and one of the easiest ways to bring Gemini into Google Workspace. And that is through using a function. Now, if anyone's unfamiliar with custom functions, Sheets has a ton of built-in functions that you can use. But if you have a niche use case, you can actually create a custom function like we're going to do here today, that can take action or, not take a lot of action, but it can read your spreadsheet and give you information that otherwise maybe you wouldn't get from our built-in functions. So you're looking at some customer reviews here, and what we're going to do is what we've done is create a Gemini function that actually calls the Gemini API to help us understand some of the things about this data. Now, the really cool thing about this is when we go to our next sheet for analysis is we can put all of our questions about the data and get many answers from Gemini at once. So you'll see here, I've already got one plugged in so that I can show you the function itself. It's called equals Gemini, and this is something we've built in Apps Script, and I will show you that in just a second. And we're really only taking 2 arguments here. First, we've got our data range that we want to prompt Gemini about. And then we plug in our prompt. And this is a great way to give your users control over what's being sent to Gemini because they get to select the data range, they get to put the prompt in. But you could also use this in other ways. You can do this to test out some prompts. So you could list your questions here, and what I'll do is just drag this function down to answer the rest of the questions with Gemini. And in just a few seconds, it's going to come back with all of the answers that we're looking for. So one of the things that we talk about with Gemini is being able to do things with unstructured data. But another thing you can do in Sheets with your structured data is ask things like unstructured questions. And this is stuff like sentiment analysis. This is where maybe you want to know things like, how many people mentioned price as a factor in their review. They might not say the word price, or you might not be able to predict what kind of keywords you need to build into that function. But with Gemini, you can get the idea of price, and it will understand, okay, any type of mention of price, this is what I want to pull in to get the right answer. And so once you test out your prompts, you can go ahead and create something like an exec dashboard where they can just select the pre-selected prompts that work well for your data and choose the right question, and then they'll get their answer. So it's a really cool thing. I'm going to hop into the code and show you how easy it is to build a custom function like this.
So Kara first showed me this demo. She wrote this.
I was so excited. I was like, wow, you are brilliant. Then she showed me the code, and I went, wow, you're brilliant for doing it with that little code.
Indeed. So as you can see, this custom function is the smallest one I've ever written, really, because it's only a couple lines of code. Really, we've got our 2 arguments, our range and our prompt, and the prompt here is just for the range of cells. We'll give the range and then the prompt, and the user is the one that's going to put in the rest of that information. And then we use our get AI summary function to send all of that to Gemini API and then return the text to the cell. Now, this is where the fun part happens because we're going to jump into the Gemini summary function. And the best part about this is once you set this up in Apps Script, you can reuse this as a template for every AI solution that you build in Apps Script. It's set it and forget it. We're going to stand this up once, and then we can copy this over and tweak it as we need when we're building new prompts for new solutions. So first, we have our payload that we're going to build. And in this scenario, all we're sending up is a text prompt. So that's the only part that we need to include. In future prompts, you might want to include things like documents, PDFs, images, and you can build that right into here. The next thing is you might want to play around with the temperature. I'm playing it pretty safe here. It's a very low temperature. I've got my data that I want to keep accurate. I don't really want anybody getting too creative here, so we're going to keep Gemini at bay. And then another thing I want to point out is the max output tokens. Now, not only is this important in a Sheets setting because you don't want to fill your cell with too much text, so you might want to limit how much output tokens Gemini can give you, but also when you're using that API, like people have mentioned, there is a cost to that. So you want to make sure you're more efficient with your token usage as well.
It also makes it faster to bring back less, too, so only bring back what you need.
Yes, exactly. So the next thing I want to talk about is safety settings. Now, these are optional to set. The default is medium, but if you are very confident in your data and you know, like we seem to be because we're just blocking none, you could, or if you just play it fast and loose like we do, you can just block none. The default is medium. If that's getting in your way, you can change that. If you need a little more security, maybe you work in education or health, you can bring that up a little bit too and change it to high. Now, the next thing I want to show you is how we're building that call. And if you're unfamiliar with Apps Script, the way that you're going to access external APIs that don't have a built-in service. Even though it's Google, it's external to Apps Script because it doesn't have a built-in service. And so we're going to use something called URL fetch service. And this is how you can call any API service. And in this case, we're using URL fetch to call the generative language API, which is the direct Gemini API. And I want to point out that we are calling Gemini API directly instead of using Vertex, because for a custom function, we don't want to introduce authorization, because that just makes things a bit more complicated. So Gemini API is the easiest way to call Gemini from a custom function. And we've also stored our API key, because that's all you need with the Gemini API, in the property service. And that is how you can safely guard your API keys in your Apps Script projects. OK, so we gather all this stuff together, we send it up to Gemini, and all we're returning is the text that we get back from Gemini. It's very straightforward, it's very exciting, and now that we've built this call, we can copy this and use it as a template in future Apps Script projects. Now, like Charles mentioned, this is Google. So we might see a built-in Gemini function come along, just like we often see many of your custom solutions turn into built-in features. But like we also see with those features, there's always a unique need that comes around that you will need to build upon your custom function. So for example, let's say you have a little more information about your users in your data that you don't really want to expose. So what we can do is use Gemini to block some PII if you're building something like a dashboard or some sort of sheet that you really don't want to show PII, or you want to give your users the option of whether the response from Gemini should include personal information or not. So here, you can see that we've updated our custom function to include a third argument. So first, we have our range again, and we're going to use our customer data over here. We've also got our prompt, which is pulling from here, and we've got a drop down that we can choose from to change it. And then this last argument is just a Boolean as to whether or not we want to include PII. And as you can see here, we don't want to include PII, and here we do want to include PII, and it's pulling in our customer name with their review. Now, just to show you what it looks like, which reviews are really good, let's see what Gemini can come up with. Whoa, so many good reviews. We're killing it. All right, so again, when we say, OK, don't show us PII in the prompt, it gives us scraped data. And when we do, it gives us the customer information. So depending on your needs, you might want to turn that on or off, or let your users turn it on or off. And I'll just jump back real quick to the custom function. Again, here was our original. And let me show you how we did this with the third argument. So now we've got the same custom function, but we're just adding a conditional as to whether or not that Boolean is true or false. And we add just a bit more direction to Gemini to make sure that it does not send us personal information back through in the response. And really, the most important part of this is tailoring that prompt and getting it right, testing and testing and testing to make sure it's reliably giving you what you need.
You had to yell at it in caps.
Because at first it was just returning it. We're like, what are we doing here? So we had to say it twice, and then it got explicit, and then it worked. And so that's really one of the key takeaways. Your prompt may be not right the first time, but stick with it and make sure you get what you want. You definitely want to make sure, again, protecting your users of false flags or wrong things coming back. The prompt is probably the hardest part. In fact, the only hard part. Everything else, as Kara mentioned, it's pretty easy. Get it working, set and forget, and just figure out how you're going to engineer your prompt and get it through there appropriately.
Exactly. All right. Now, one of my favorite demos is coming up next.
They always say necessity is the mother of invention. And so, as Stephen mentioned earlier, one of our things we love to figure out what great use cases are. So I came up with a personal use case that made sense. I've been at Google for a little over 12 years. And I have a mission to make. I have a really bad habit. When I do anything with a document, take notes, whatever I'm working on, I open the document, and I start putting stuff in it, and I close it. And I leave it named Untitled Document. So I did a search in my 12-year history of Google Drive. I had 222, exactly, I didn't make it up, 222 untitled documents that I had no idea what they were. So, necessity is the mother of invention. I created an add-on to help me fix that. So we have an add-on. here it's working in Drive. And again, for the demo purposes, you can see I've got a bunch of files that I know nothing about. Now, there's a reason why lazy me didn't open up 222 files and fix them, because I didn't want to understand what they're about and give them names. So we said, why can't Gemini do that? So let me pick a file here randomly out of the docs. I'll pick the first one just because that makes sense. It's going to go out to Gemini. And what Gemini did real quickly, actually, came back and brought me back a summary, because I asked for it in my prompt. And it brought me back 3 names of that file. So all I have to do is say, you know what? The summary looks great, comprehensive guide, Apps Script, I like it. Let's just take the first one. I'm fine with that. And it went off and it renamed it for me. And again, I never opened the file. I never looked at it. It even came back with a second summary as the result on my new one, just in case I wanted to approve it again or refresh it automatically, easily. So I could do that for a bunch of them. I can come down here, pick another file. You can get an error in your demo, which is really cool. Don't know why that happened. Fun with code. That's how you know it's
Yeah.
That's the great thing. I mean, we actually love this because literally in your presentation, you don't know what you're going to get back from Gemini. And Kara mentioned tightening up. Literally don't sometimes. And so the hardest part as a developer is parsing that content and making sure you error handle around it. I actually thought I did error handle around that, but approve my skills there. Let's see what's coming back on the next one. Make sure you error handle for all use cases. A blank document and an empty document are kind of 2 things, and I think I tripped over that.
Oh.
So what happened here is I just opened up an empty document, and this is my favorite part of the feature. It would have worked if it didn't hit that other file. The intelligence looked at this. In fact, the intelligence didn't even need to look at this. It looked at the content even before I called AI. I realized this document's not worth keeping. I can just move it to the trash right from there. So it automatically, you'll see, you would push it out. So all we're doing, in this case, we are calling Vertex. We're sending over a prompt that asks for a summary and 3 items. And then when we're done, we simply call the Drive API and then say, rename it, or delete it, or throw an error if you feel like it. Which that one happened there. So this is an interesting use case, but I mentioned I had 222. I don't think I want to do that this many times. So Carol, what's your favorite thing about Workspace?
Oh, my favorite thing about Workspace, and especially Workspace add-ons, is that you can work across apps. You can extend other apps to do batch operations, like we're going to show you in a minute, because when Charles showed me this demo, I thought, wow, this is really cool, and this saves me a lot of time, but I'm still too lazy to go file by file and rename this file with Gemini, even if I don't have to open it. So I challenged Charles to find all of my untitled documents, or as many as I wanted, and why can't I just have them all update at the same time?
Perfect. And challenge accepted. I even added another feature. I allowed you to do it not just for untitled documents, but maybe you have a whole class of documents you were naming, you want to look at those. So in the UI, I allowed you to actually override that and change it. So I upped you 1.
Oh.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to do that exact same thing, but again, first we're going to call Andrew's Drive API. And we're going to find all files in my entire corpus I have access to, bring them back. Again, on this demo machine, I only have a handful. But while we're doing that, we're going to bring back the files. We're going to call Gemini for each file, so it's going to take a few seconds. Again, in best use case processes, you may want to throttle this. Maybe you don't want all 222 or 220,000 or whatever, so you might want to throttle it. In this case, you could do it at folder level or something. Here it's come back, and it's brought me back the files in bulk. I just have a normal table now where I've put nice select buttons. I got the top name instead of 3 names, and then I get the summary right by side of it. So I can hit a button now and just make this entitled document problem go away forever. But you've heard a lot of folks say human in the loop here today, or you keep the user involved. One of the things you don't want to do is have AI get between your user and their intent. So say, for example, here, I want to override something because it's simply data sitting in a sheet. I can do a story about Spot, the dog with spots. And I can allow a human to actually interject to this before I come out, and then I rename this. So real quick, I'm going to open up that file, that folder again, so you can see that folder. Hopefully, that's not the folder. That's the doc. Hit the wrong link again. Hold on. Let me go back to there. There's the folder. If you don't put the glasses on, you can't see your own demo. Happens. But now you see, quickly, I have named all those, and you can see it is a story about Spot, the dog with spots, and all the rest were named. And so that's a great way to really use that loop. Thank you for that soul clap over there. You are my favorite audience member. All right. So I built this, and I was kind of pumped about it and thought it was neat. Kara thought it was pumped and neat. But then Kara came up with this next idea. And this is the part where I'm humbled and embarrassed because, first of all, anybody here built Google Workspace add-ons? Okay. Kara's going to show something that is game-changing for it. Because everybody knows building your own UI out, and we've got great tools like the first version of Car Builder that Steve built, and there's a newer version of Car Builder, but that still requires a lot of heavy lifting. Kara's going to show you. Well, you know what? You show them. I'm not going to say any more.
To Charles's point, if anyone's built a Workspace add-on, you know that you have to use the UI kit or card framework, and this is a special set of JSON that is specific to Google. And it's not necessarily difficult, but because it's specific to Google, you might not be as familiar with it. It might not come as easily to you as something like HTML or CSS. It has a lot of great benefits in that, as David had mentioned before, there are some great benefits of not having to design a UI, and you can use those beautiful widgets that Charles showed us in his add-ons. But I got to thinking, instead of using something like a card builder where you kind of have to know what you're already doing, what if you, and I'm sure we've all done this, what if you woke up in the middle of the night and you thought, oh, I have a great idea for an add-on. I just want to draw it out real quick so I can visualize it in my mind. And I thought, what if you could feed Gemini a picture of your wireframe and then have it give you the JSON objects that you need to build the UI. So I'm going to show you a wireframe that I've built in Figma. It's very straightforward. And we're going to go ahead and plug this into Gemini. And I'm calling this app my widget wizard. OK. So let's see how this goes. This is going to send the image of the wireframe. I've also created a PDF of our reference documentation for the UI kit, and I'll send that up to Gemini as well. And in my Apps Script project, I actually created a JSON sample for Gemini to use of all the widgets that you can use in an add-on. So here, what I've got is some pretty good-looking JSON. Now, I've done this enough times to know that the button here isn't correct. So I'm going to run it one more time. And this is a point that I want to make where David was talking about how, for most of your solutions, you can build the built-in models. And for this demo, this is what I'm using. I'm just sending up some additional context. But if I was going to bring this to prod, I might think about training a model to be very specific to the card service to bring this out to the public users. But because I know this pretty well, I can actually look at this and understand, OK, now it's correct. I'm using the right objects. And so just to give you a proof of concept, I'm going to go ahead and copy this JSON. I've got a testing app that I've built out just for this. So we'll paste it in here, make sure everything is looking good. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then just to remind you what the wireframe looks like, this is what it looks like. And I will open the add-on that I've just plugged that JSON in. And I've got my image, a heading, a paragraph, a user input widget, and a button. Now, do we have a little time to do another one?
Absolutely. What if, yeah, absolutely.
So back to my story about waking up in the middle of the night like we all do, is what if you don't have Figma at the ready? So we're going to go with a hand-drawn, and be glad that the documentation is not written in handwriting, because I was meant to be a doctor. OK. So let's say you've just hand-drawn a wireframe here. Now, we're going to copy this link and see if Gemini can also produce some good JSON given a hand-drawn wireframe of our add-on. Now, again, this is sending it up to Gemini. It's got the photo, it's got the reference documentation, and a full sample of JSON widgets. So hopefully, this will be able to do some great work for us. OK. All right, we've got some great JSON here. I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And in my testing app, I'm going to replace the previous widgets with our hand-drawn ones. Oh. Yeah, this is a user error. I did this last night.
Grabbing and dropping.
Whoop, this is not my forte. OK, so here we are, plugged it in. And when I go into Gmail, where I've set up Gmail as a host app, I'm just going to open the hand-drawn image so we can all see it again. And now I'm going to refresh the add-on to the new widgets. OK, paragraph text goes here, user input, and a button.